Well, hey, good morning and welcome to another time of devotional. In the book of 1 Samuel chapter 12, we find an interesting story about Israel rejecting the rule of God and petitioning God for a human king. Samuel served as a priest and judge over Israel, but that wasn't what Israel wanted. They wanted a king. They wanted to be like every other nation, not a nation that was ruled directly by God. You see, Samuel, in this particular part of the story, Samuel wasn't happy about it, but he asked God if he would allow it. God was not happy about it, and he gave Samuel words of warning for Israel. There would be a cost for having a carnal, natural king. Israel's desire to be like everyone else was greater than their desire to be led by God, so they insisted. With God and Samuel warning them against doing so, Israel chose an earthly king, and God allowed it. God allowed Israel a human king, but not without giving guidelines. And that's what caught my attention in today's reading. In 1 Samuel chapter 12, verses 14 and 15, it says, "Now if you fear and worship the Lord and listen to his voice, and if you do not rebel against the Lord's commands, then both you and your king will show that you recognize the Lord as your God. But if you rebel against the Lord's commands and refuse to listen to him, then his hand will be as heavy upon you as it was upon your ancestors." And God led Samuel spoke, saying, "I'll give you your king, but if you don't follow the true king, well, it's going to be bad news for you." Now, I know many of you know the story in the future chapters. You know that Israel does not listen and follow God, and you may be shaking your head right now and wondering why this group of people just simply can't get their act together. Well, the truth is, you and me, we're often just like Israel. How many times have we wanted God's blessings without the necessity of following God's plan? We want results of obedience without obedience itself. However, obedience should never be negotiable when following Jesus. It always works out for our benefit when we obey his direction for our lives. So how about you today? What are you requesting from God? Are you pushing your own way like Israel did? You see, God allowed Israel to have their way, but as promised, the cost was heavy. Will you be like Israel and pay the price, or will you be led by God's perfect plan? You see, sometimes we are trying to be led by God, but the answers don't seem clear or fast in coming. Maybe you feel like God hasn't yet returned your voicemail in prayer. Well, let me encourage you. He hears you, and he will answer. But what will you do in the meantime? I want to encourage you this morning to be faithful to what he has already said. God does not consistently change his mind. You can follow his established word and win every time. Secondly, be faithful with what he has already given you. You see, he may be waiting to see if you will be faithful with what you have before trusting you with greater things. So notice that in both areas, faithfulness to what he has said and faithfulness with what he has given, it involves obedience. Consistent and willing obedience is what God requires of all of us. I'm reminded of the passage in John 14 where Jesus gets done washing his disciples' feet. After he does this, he says these words. He says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." You see, obedience, following God, isn't done out of fear, but rooted in our love for him. So today, decide to follow Jesus. When the desire comes to choose your own king, resist it. Recognize that the blessing of obeying God is always greater than the cost of choosing your own path. You follow him because you love him. He blesses you because he loves you. In total honesty, who really gets the greatest benefit from that deal? Obviously, you and I do. So let's pray. Lord, today as we step into our next, God, we're going to be faced with a lot of opportunity to just simply obey, follow the rules, the plans, the guidelines, and just the steps that you have ahead of us. Would you give us the will to simply obey and follow what your will is telling us to do for the days to come? God, we believe that you've put this step in front of us for a divine reason.